Oh, what a year it has been for 2018 in regards to video games. If you have somehow not seen the title to this video, these are my top 10 favorite games of 2018. So keep in mind that I am ranking these games based on my personal preference, how much I enjoyed them, as well as overall game quality, which I would think contributed to how much I would enjoy these games. Also, obviously, I have not played every single game which came out this year. There's a lot of indie titles which I missed. There's a lot of Switch titles which I couldn't play because I don't have a Switch. And so, yeah, there's a lot of games which I did not get a chance to play. So if there's a favorite of yours which is not on here, that might be why. Or I might have just thought it sucked. That's possible too. So, without further ado, let's dive into this list, shall we? Going in at number 10 is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This is the finale of the new Lara Croft trilogy, and this is honestly not a game that I enjoyed terribly much, but it's pretty much like the best of the worst of the stuff that I played, just because the story just didn't do a lot for me. The gameplay is pretty solid, the combat, the navigation, the exploring, there's a lot to do post-game, in my opinion, which makes the game more or less worth it. But if you're coming here for a story which, like I did, it just doesn't have a lot of meat to it. It has good content at the beginning and at the end, but there's just not a lot in the middle to really just make it well worth your time. I expected a grand finale which explored the psyche of Lara Croft, show kind of the shadow which she's kind of become over the world per se, but it didn't do that for me, and so it was kind of a disappointment. But again, it's kind of the best of the worst, so that's why it's at number 10. Number 9 is going to be Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom. This is the first game that I played in the Ni no Kuni franchise, and it's one which I honestly quite enjoyed. It's got a very unique combat system, which, while it took a little time getting used to, was a very fun experience overall, and getting to journey to various kingdoms to get their help to try to conquer this great evil and basically unite the world under one united front, essentially, was a really interesting way to do an RPG video game when generally you're kind of going place to place to try to conquer places and defeat the bosses, which you still do. But it just had this really unique concept to it. There's a bit of a time travel / like different realities or realms type of feature to it as well, which I found really interesting. And overall, it's a really fun game. I haven't gotten back to it since I platinumed it, but it's a really fun game regardless. Number 8 is going to be Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age. I played a couple games in the Dragon Quest franchise before playing Dragon Quest XI, but I've never really gotten terribly far into them. Just for whatever reason, they just didn't stick for me. So when I saw a new one coming out on PS4, I was really hopeful to dive into it and spend a lot of time on it, and that is basically what I did, and I found it to be a really well done story. Ultimately, the combat was really fun. It had kind of a basically play how you want to play mode, where you can basically do an auto gameplay system or a kind of choose every action yourself type of thing. I just like how the game worked. It's basically your typical RPG. You go around the world trying to get this grand sword of light to conquer the evil darkness which is enveloping the world, and then it just has this really interesting twist midway, 2/3 of the way through the game, which just changes everything, and it's not something that I think I've seen before in a video game to do what it did. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't played it, but it just has a really unique concept, really fun, memorable characters, and was just a really good time overall, and I really hope that we get to see more from this franchise in the US on the PS4. Number 7 is going to go to Spider-Man on the PS4. Now, I know that a lot of people did love this game. They thought it was Game of the Year material. I thought it was fine. The story was pretty good, didn't blow me away. The combat is mainly what I had the issue with, because there were times which I could just annihilate enemies without really having to work too hard, and there were other times which I got killed in about 3 hits. So the gameplay just never really seemed all that balanced to me personally, and so it kind of detracted from some of my enjoyment of it overall. And then, like I said, the story, while good, I found to be kind of predictable just based on things which I knew about the Spider-Man lore already. That said, the graphics, really, really well done. And just web slinging around the city is the most fun it's been since Spider-Man 2 on the PS2. And so just being that good, it had to be on this top 10 list to some degree. And I platinumed the game, so I had a fun time with it. It wasn't something which I terribly hated, but just wasn't the Game of the Year material, which I think a lot of people had. It being lived up to in their heads. And if you did, more power to you. Just didn't work that well for me. Number 6 is going to go to A Way Out. This is a very unique game because it just requires a co-op experience in order to play it. You basically start out playing as these two inmates. They're in prison for a various reason for both of them, but they find that they have to work together to escape and then basically stay on the run throughout the game to a very suspenseful and climatic ending. And just the fact that it requires you to play the experience with a partner or another person online if you want to do that, just makes the game a lot more memorable, in my opinion. I played it personally with my brother over the course of a couple days, and it just made for a really interesting time because we both have our unique play styles, and those kind of came out in the individual characters that we played as. And so it just made for a really fun game, really fun experience, and I hope to see kind of more games in this fashion in the future. Number 5 is going to go to Far Cry 5. I have been a fan of the Far Cry series for quite a while, since Far Cry 3. Far Cry 4, I have never been able to finish for whatever reason, but I really enjoyed Far Cry Primal as well, alongside Far Cry 3. And so getting into Far Cry 5 with this new story, this new world, this new area, and just this different type of concept of what a Far Cry game is, where you can basically tackle whatever part of the story you want to, in whatever order you want to. Made for a really unique experience overall. I kind of had this kind of more open world sense to it, where you could kind of tackle any of the 3 territories. You got to see bits and pieces of that world, of what the different bosses, basically realms, are like, and it all kind of tied together towards the end to a ending, which seems to be being continued on in the next installment, which comes out next year. So I'm really curious about that. But overall, the experience was a lot of fun, and it actually had an online multiplayer, which I actually had a fun time doing. I got the platinum on this one as well, and it's one which I was kind of dreading with the multiplayer, but I had a really fun experience with it, and that's a rarity for me with multiplayer games. So, yeah, Far Cry 5, definitely worthy of the number 5 spot, in my opinion. Number 4 on this list is going to go to Quantic Dreams' Detroit Become Human. This is a game which I absolutely loved when I first played it, because of just how unique the concept was. The branching narrative paths, the 3 main protagonists that we have in this game, who all have basically their own stories, their own identities, their own personalities. It was just a very massive project for this team to take on. And it's one which I loved going back through repeatedly, just trying to find different endings, find collectibles, things of that sort, and just made the experience that much better when you can kind of see what your different actions end up causing and not causing as you play through the game in various encounters. This was another one which I ended up platinuming, and it was a really fun time doing it because, like I said, the story and the characters and the voice actors and everything of that sort just worked really well, came together, formed really memorable characters, and it would be interesting to see a sequel to this to some degree, but I'm guessing that the studio will probably move on to their next project, whatever that ends up being. I'm sure it'll be fantastic. Number 3 on this list might be a tad controversial, but is going to Red Dead Redemption 2. And I'm just going to be fair, this is the one game on this list which I have not actually completed quite yet. I'm about halfway through it right now. I took my time to kind of start to jump into it, and so I've just recently started to do that, but just in the 20 some hours maybe that I've played this thing, it has proven itself to be a really good and fun title. Arthur Morgan is a very memorable character. He has a really interesting personality and character to him, and I really like his interactions with various members of the gang which you're riding with, and seeing their backstories come out through various missions and horse rides and things of that sort. The gameplay also very fun once you get the hang of it. It took me a little bit to kind of figure out the controls and really get used to them, honestly, so there is a little bit of an uphill battle with learning curve to some degree, at least for me. But overall, I'm really enjoying the game so far, and it is fantastic. And if any of the other things which I've heard about it are true, it's probably gonna definitely deserve to be on this list, probably higher than it ends up being. Number 2 is a game which was in my top 10, actually it was the number 1 game of the year for me for a majority of this year, honestly, and that is God of War. This is basically a relaunch per se of the God of War franchise while keeping the lore and the narrative of the original main trilogy intact, with Kratos having defeated all of the Mount Olympus Greek gods and now basically living with his son, being an old grizzled person, or an older grizzled person, in the Norse world now. So we get this whole new experience, this whole new gameplay, whole new game style. Instead of his Blades of Chaos, he ends up with this axe, the Leviathan axe, which is just a really unique gameplay style. They revamped everything. The story is amazing and fantastic, and easily one of the best of the year, in my opinion, because of just how well done it is, how much it sets up for future installments, while also paying tribute to the original franchise. And so yeah, there's a lot that I can say about it, but overall, God of War, it is probably worthy of my #1 spot. But there's another game which ends up taking that title, which I didn't really expect when I first started playing it, and that is going to be Assassin's Creed Odyssey. For whatever reason, this is a game which I find myself consistently going back to, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just such a fun adventure. I think that God of War has a better story and graphics, but for whatever reason, there's just something about the gameplay and the core experience of Assassin's Creed Odyssey which I've just really, really enjoyed. I think that really is what it comes down to when picking a game of the year, because you have just the story taking place in the Greek world during the Peloponnesian War with Greece versus Athens, and it just makes for this really interesting concept, this really interesting narrative structure of Cassandra, who I played as, basically trying to find her father and find her brother and free him from this evil cult organization. And now with the DLC, it just kind of adds even more lore to this character, and I'm really, really curious to see what they end up doing in regards to this game and everything that sets up in the future installments, whatever those end up entailing. So yeah, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it's easily my game of the year, just because it's based solely on enjoyment. I have enjoyed this game so much. God of War, I finished it, I platinumed it way back in like March, April-ish, somewhere around then, and I haven't touched it since then. And Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I finished in October. I've gone back into it multiple times in that time period. So yeah, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, easily my game of the year, shockingly. So guys, those are my picks of my top 10 games of 2018. Let me know yours in the comments down below. You probably had ones which I didn't include. You probably had some that I did, but in different orders. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I'd love to hear them and discuss them with you. Also, make sure to check out my other top 10 videos that I've done in regards to anime, movies, anticipated movies of next year. Make sure to like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. Once again, if you said choose, I appreciate it immensely. And as always, people, my name is Nick Pell, and once again, keep on watching.